Welcome. It's great to be here at CMX. As you know, my name is Scott Wilder, and today I'm going to basically provide a framework for growing and scaling your online communities. What I'm going to do is basically share some tools and best practices, things I've learned in the digital trenches working at Intuit, working at Adobe and Google. But I also like to point out that in 2014, I made a pretty significant career decision, which I think, as community managers and community leaders, we should always think about how we manage our career. What I did was, at the time, there was kind of a ceiling for community managers and community leaders. There's only so far you could go in the organization. So I basically said I was working at Marketo, I knew Salesforce, I knew HubSpot, so I doubled down on growth marketing, which tended to be a hot trend there. So at the time, I basically said, I'm going to work on my skill set with community as well as growth marketing. As the famous baseball player Yogi Berra used to say, if there's a fork in the road, take it. And so that's what I decided to do. So today I'm going to talk about growth marketing. Growth marketing, for me, is about a structure, an experimentational alignment, and data in all phases of the life cycle. So really thinking about your organization structure. It's about the structure in the org. It's about experimentation, alignment with other groups, and data. But we all know these days that everybody's talking about growth. Today, I'm just talking about growth marketing. But there's also product-led growth. There's also marketing-led growth. There's community-led growth, which we all love, and customer success. So I think a lot of what I'm going to be sharing today will basically be, items that can apply to each of those different areas. Again, I'm going to provide a framework to help you grow to success. I'm going to talk about what a growth squad is and how to run with a growth squad. I'm going to talk about how to optimize your journey, how to align with internal teams, and how to be data-driven and what it means to be data-driven. All of this, there's going to be a lot to absorb. So really just pick one or two things that you can use after the presentation, but pick your path, decide where you want to go. So let's start with a growth squad. So some people call them growth teams in organizations. Some people say they're focused on startups. Some people say they're focused on more mature companies. For me, a growth squad is a small team focused on solving a business problem. The first growth squad I was on was at Adobe, and basically there were five of us. There were basically five of us that were focused on how to improve engagement within the first 24 hours. And during that experience, I learned the value of having a small team focused on a single business idea. This idea is also reinforced at two books that I highly recommend. One is called Organizing Genius by Warren Bennis, which really focuses on some of the great small teams we've had in history, Disney, Imagineering, the Macintosh team, etc. And the second book is probably for a more older school, but I think if you have any kind of development on your team, and if you work closely with developers, the Mythical Man Month focuses on the idea that the more engineers you add, the more people you add in development, the slower development's going to take place. So again, small teams and staying focused is extremely important. Growth squads tend to start out blending four different disciplines. Engineers, who definitely want to bring something to market and do it well. Data, that really wants to let the numbers drive the decisions. Product, that wants to take user feedback and user information and create a great product. And marketing. The challenges in getting these teams together, whether it's on a growth marketing team or if you're integrating those practices onto a community team, there's usually chaos in the beginning. How many of us work in an organization where we see somebody, they didn't mean to do a bad thing, but they kind of went rogue, right? So you're managing the community and all of a sudden you discover there's a Slack group in the organization. There's a LinkedIn group. There's a Facebook group, and it's not integrated into the experience that you want. For me, this reminds me of the three-ring circus. When I was a little kid and I went to Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, my father would say, look at that, it's great. The problem was I didn't know where to focus. And so I think it's really important that when you start working with these small teams, you pick on one item to focus on. Again, the growth squad can focus on people from product, data, marketing, engineering. This is how we have our growth team at HubSpot. The one thing we aspire to do, and I'll be transparent saying we're not doing it quite yet, but something I've done in the past is integrate customers into your team. At Intuit and Google, we actually invited customers to the table to sit in our staff meetings to give us direct feedback on our plans. The key is to make them feel part of the process. It's hard to do co-creation if you just throw a request over the wall. Once you have your growth team in place, then you can take that model and push it out to different parts of the organization, take a decentralized approach. So here you have, and what we did at Intuit was many different growth teams sprinkled throughout the organization. Jeff Bezos likes to say a growth team should never be larger than the two-size pizza rule. In other words, your growth team should be able to consume 2 pizzas. You only order 2 pizzas. You never order more. So again, when you think about growth squads, know it's an evolution. If you tie this to your community team, at first it's going to be a little chaotic. Everybody's learning something new. But over time, you basically will develop some best practices. And I believe that you can actually push these best practices out to other parts of the organization. So again, when you're running with a growth squad, think nimble. Think how you focus on a few business issues and co-create with your customers. The next part of the framework is optimizing your journey. At Intuit, I used to walk into Scott Cook, the founder's office, and he would say, "What are you working on today?" And then he'd say, "Wait a minute, time out." He'd go to the whiteboard and he would draw this triangle. He would say, "Look, at the bottom, that's the stuff you have to do. In the middle, those are nice incremental gains, but at the top are the big bets. That's where you guys should focus. You should focus on the stuff you need to take care of and the big bets that are going to move the needle." I find a lot of times on different community teams, there's many different projects people are working on. So as leaders, we need to figure out what are the critical few that we want to focus on. One way to do that is use the SCORE model to prioritize your big bets, get them listed out, and then determine based on scalability, cost, how easy it is to operationalize, the ROI on it, and the effort required, and that can help you determine which big bets to focus on. Once you do that, then you get into the bread and butter of growth marketing. You start testing, you start figuring out where you should test, you develop a hypothesis, you test, learn, and iterate. So here's an example that don't take the numbers as, the numbers are just examples here. A simple A/B test, right? So the problem here is how to reduce bounce rates from your home page. You might only get X% of your traffic to the home page versus other landing pages, but 50, 60% of the folks are bouncing from that page. So a potential solution could be a personalized message. It could be a community manager doing a meet and greet. And the goal is to reduce bounce rates by 10%. So you're setting up your simple A/B test. Here's the HubSpot community homepage. You can determine where you want to run those tests. If you really want to be significant on this, you only want to test in one place, and you only want to run the A/B test through a period of time where you can get significant amount of results. This slide has a lot of information on it, so I'll talk you through it. So you ran a personalized message on the home page. You see here, it's either join the webinar today or John Smith joined the webinar today. And then you can look at the results and determine what is the winner in this A/B test. Some things to think about. You might be solving for clicks to get people to the site, or you might be solving for the post rate or number of posts is what we were solving for. Very easy to run these A/B tests on your own community. What you can do is if you're using Khoros or Higher Logic, you can basically take a snippet of code from Optimizely or Convert.com, which we use, or Google Optimize, and insert that onto your platform and run those A/B tests. Let's talk about growth loops, another area where you can run A/B tests. Here's a simple growth loop from Instagram. The user shares a photo starting at 12 o'clock. The photo is viewed, 6 o'clock, another person's intrigued by the photo, and then they post their own photo. The interesting thing about this is when Instagram started, they didn't have a marketing manager. They basically depended on this growth loop to drive the growth of the organization. So how do you apply that to a community? A good starting point is the customer journey. Just a little comment here about customer journeys and a pet peeve of mine. I've been in many organizations where we develop the customer journey, we map it out. The problem is it's a one and done deal. You map it out and then you leave it there and you don't even check it for another year or so. You don't verify what's going on in the community, see if you've got it right. Are you really looking at the right key points in terms of the customer journey? This is just an example, a very simple community example of a customer journey, right? Somebody joins the community. They could be from Google, from your homepage, or from in the product, and then they go through this evolution on the site. It's a lot to address all those different touch points. So with growth loops, you can pick one or two to focus on. I highly recommend onboarding, right? You don't want to lose them when they get to the party. You want to make sure they engage with others, or at least go deeper into the site. Or if you really believe that making a post is something where after that people feel like they have skin in the game, then you can focus on that. So here, I'm focusing on having people do their first post. Today, maybe only 2% of your new members post within 24 hours. The question is, what's a good solution to get them to post more? Is it a pop-up? Is it a meet and greet? And then your success criteria could be, can you improve things? Can you move the needle by 5 or 10%? So you take an action, it has an output, and you see if you reach your goal. So again, applying this to the HubSpot community, somebody visits the community, they read a post. Now you want them to create a new post. That's the key aha moment. That's the moment what Pinterest loves to talk about, aha moments, when you can actually change their behavior and make sure they feel more part of the community. So your hypothesis, if you remember, we talked about that, is after a person reads a post, can a pop-up message motivate them to create a message? Can a pop-up message motivate them to create a post? So we've set up our control, which is doing nothing. Here, we're actually doing two tests, an A/B test. It's actually a control versus A/B, right? So we're offering a pop-up, or we're having the moderator meet and greet them. Here's an example. We're on the HubSpot community where we could have a little message to encourage them to actually post. And here we're taking you through the whole loop. They visit the community, they read a post. The action we took, whether it was the pop-up or a meet and greet, has inspired them to create a new post. That content gets indexed, Google searches on it, somebody finds it, and then that person comes back to the site. Growth loops are a great tool to use to dissect the customer experience, the customer journey, and then figure out where to focus to improve engagement. Other companies out there use these aha moments or these growth loops, include Zoom. So they're looking at the weekly hosted meetings. That's the number they're looking at. Airbnb looks for 4-star reviews. What are these key moments when you know somebody's on board? When I was at Adobe, for example, I worked with a photography team with Lightroom, and we said that if we could get somebody to import, edit, and share within 24 hours, it increased retention by 20+%. So again, in the optimized part of this framework, decide on the big bets, define your hypothesis and desired outcome, and then implement those tests. Again, this is all a framework that you can use right after this meeting or when you want. The next part of this is, how do you align internally with teams? Our new CEO loves to talk about alignment being greater than strategy. Alignment eats strategy. I think one of the biggest challenges for us as community managers is sometimes we're an add-on. Sometimes it's a siloed experience. So it's really important to figure out how you get integrated with other teams. If you're not integrated, or if these customer-facing groups are not integrated as well, obviously there's a problem. Lots of confusion. You could have people in your champion program. You could people have in your advocacy program. It could be the same people and two different groups are communicating with them. Same thing with, you have a community and then you have a Facebook group. You need to be aligned with those folks in the company to make sure there's consistent messages. So how do you do that? The first thing is to determine your true north metric. Your goal, pick one goal, right? It's really hard to pick one metric. Make sure it's memorable, measurable, and actionable, and figure out what the outcome you want from that and get alignment around that. For us at HubSpot, engagement is the key metric. Engagement of the number of, we call them portals, but think of it instances, the number of HubSpot customers who are active on the community. So again, get that true north metric, define it, and get alignment internally. Again, here's some other companies and their true north metrics. In getting alignment with other teams, one of the things you can do, and this is a model that I used in a previous company, and obviously there's different types of organizational alignments. We had a very small community team, the 3 people on the left in orange. The green were people from other groups. But basically what we did is we determined representatives or captains, whatever you want to call them, and had those people attend our staff meetings as well. Have those people work closely with us to ensure that whatever we're doing on the community can meet the goals of the functional groups within the company, right? So it could be the marketing group that has CRM, product group. Obviously, they're going to have ideas and run, or not obviously, but they could run ideas, ideation, and betas on the site. It's important that somebody on the team works to make sure that each person knows what's going on. The next way to get alignment is to have consistent processes. We call them sprint processes, stolen from the agile business process. So sprint processes exist every week at HubSpot. We basically decide what's going to be in the following sprint. We get alignment with our developers, our QA team, everybody involved in terms of what features and functionality we're going to launch. Today, we do a sprint meeting every week, but we have a release every month. You can then have daily scrums. Some companies do that, some don't, just to ensure that everything is aligned. And then there's the sprint review, which is an opportunity for the devs to show you what they're developing or to reflect on what's working, what's not working. And then after you complete a sprint, I think it's a great idea to just step back and figure out what's working. The key in all this is alignment and continuous improvement. Another thing is transparency, whether you're using Jira or Asana. Basically, open up your Kanban board, open up your project list, and let everybody know exactly where you stand. The more transparent you can be, the faster you're going to be able to move. At HubSpot, we have something called the culture code. We like to refer to that as our second product. And so we favor autonomy and take ownership. That's one principle in the culture code. And that's really important with these teams here. While it sounds like a lot of cross-functional work, the key is to empower the individuals on the front lines, the individuals in the functional groups, and give them ownership. So in terms of alignment, determine your true north metric, get aligned with other teams, and be clear about your systems and processes. Again, this is a framework to help you drive success and scale your community. The last part of this framework is to be data-driven. We all talk about data-driven. As our friend Mark Twain likes to say, lies, damn lies, those statistics. So I think the key here really is that you need to be, as a group, it's important to be clear about what the true north metric is, what the other statistics or metrics you're trying to solve for, and make sure the team understands that. Those metrics should support the questions you're trying to answer on the community. So here's a dashboard from a community I worked on 2 years ago. The first thing we did was focus on the big issues you want to solve. So starting in the upper left-hand corner with engagement, are customers visiting and engaging? Then we had questions like, are they satisfied? Are they finding answers quickly and efficiently? And what's the financial impact? Again, so finding the financial impact. Then the second column here is all the metrics that rolled up to these numbers. And then we had our goal in we had the baseline in FY19 and then the goal in FY20. Everybody had access to this dashboard. And we kept looking at the questions here and trying to figure out, are we answering those questions? There are different tools you can use as well to complement your dashboard. A cohort analysis. So what you're seeing here is in the left-hand side, it says if you can squint July 4th, it has different dates listed out. So the first date's July 4th, and then you can see if those people are returning to the site on a daily basis. Over time, the number gets less, but basically you're saying that if 14% showed up to the site on day one, then it becomes 8%. And so you're really trying to figure out how to make that cohort engage more over time, and you're using this dashboard to track it. Now your cohort's going to be different groups. You could say you have a group of advocates, and that's a cohort. You could say you have a group of folks who've gone into the nonprofit section of your community. So cohorts can be based on a group of people that you want to track over time. Another key metric for the team at HubSpot is, are customers helping customers? It's really important to look at peer-to-peer support or the type of people that are answering questions. So again, you're establishing your goal, which here is the thin line at 80 some odd percent. It's about 75, 80 some odd percent. And then you're looking at over time, are customers helping other customers? And if you put the energy into it, it's good to look at what type of customers are helping each other. Is it the champions and all-stars? Is it a different group? One thing about customers here is we tend to look at the champions and the all-stars in the community. I'm a big fan of looking at the rising stars, the people who down the road will eventually become your champions on the site. The next tool here is from Hotjar, which I heard today got acquired. So what you're looking at here are screenshots of different pages in the community. You're looking at a heat map. The red part shows that people have spent more time in those areas of the site. So it's showing you where people are clicking, where they're going on the site. Hotjar also offers video. So what you can do is make a bowl of popcorn, sit down and watch videos of how individual users, and it could even be individual users from a cohort, are surfing through your site. Really important if you want to understand the different paths people take. Speaking of paths, one of the things we also look at HubSpot is where people are going as they search deeper in the site. So here, path analysis is another key tool. You can use Google Analytics for that if you want, or Amplitude. So basically the orange is the first page they land on. So one thing I want to call out there is, many of you probably know this, but not everybody goes to the homepage first, especially if they're using Google, right? So they could go to a category page, a topic page, a discussion page, and leaderboard. And so this really gives you a sense of how people move deeper in the site. So the second orange block is category hubs. So these people are then going to the idea section or the CRM section. And earlier in the discussion, I talked about these different captains within the company. So I would work with the ideation captain here, that person Joe who runs ideas, and figure out what we can do if we want to do it to drive people deeper into the ideas section. So we've been talking a lot about numbers, but voice of the customer and talking to the customer is extremely important. I had one CEO I sat down with and I showed him all my data, and he would throw it in the trash and just say, tell me what the customers are saying. I want to know it in their own words. I eventually brought a tape recorder to the meeting so he could hear it. So, you know, we are communicating with customers on these community platforms, but it doesn't hurt to actually fire up a Zoom, talk to one or two customers real time, and hear from them how they're using the community. A lot of my, inspiration comes from this book that recently came out, Working Backwards, which I highly recommend, from Amazon. Jeff Bezos in the book says, we innovate by starting with the customers and working backwards. That's because that becomes the touchstone for how we invent. So Amazon does an incredible job at talking to the customer first. And in fact, then they write a press release for the customer and for the media about what the product is, and then they go into requirements. Another quote from our HubSpot culture code: our best results come when decisions are insight-driven and data-powered. We love data. I'm a big data fan, and I highly recommend it, that you figure out how you can leverage data, not just from your community, but also know the journey starts before your community. How do people who go from your product or from your website go to the community? So for data-driven decisions, start with the what, build your dashboard, and pick your tools wisely. So what I've tried to do today is provide a framework, a roadmap to drive growth, suggesting run with a growth squad, optimize the journey, align with other teams, and ensure that you're data-driven. But obviously it's a long journey that we're on here, right? A year ago, we wouldn't be talking about social audio, and that might be something you're thinking about. There's also automation and virtual reality. So as you take these tools, if you decide to use them, think about how these new technologies can impact things. So that's pretty much it. A quick sprint here of different tools, different programs, different ways to drive community growth, leveraging growth marketing. I suggest that you take one or two things. It could be an A/B test, could be a growth loop, it could be how you align your organizations, and try it out today. We used to say at Intuit is, once you learn something, teach it right away, because that will help you learn it even better. So what I try and do with my kids at home, the minute I learn something, maybe not with growth loops, I try and teach them so they can learn it better. So now let's take a few questions. I'll open it up.
So just for the record, so Scott, if you, oh, there we go. You're now back. I was going to say me to be appearing on the screen so that people can actually see you. So that was an awesome presentation. Thank you very much. Really, really appreciate it. Everybody had so many aha moments, I guess. So definitely, we also love floating heads. Definitely, that's one thing. So we don't have a lot of time, but there are so many questions. Let's try and see which one of them have been upvoted for answering. So Chikadunu is asking, what would you say are 3 KPIs for a community forum? That's the one that received the most votes.
Great question. So I always focus on engagement first, and then engagement, you can break it down by how fast people are responding to questions, right? And who those people are. I kind of highlighted that in the community here. You can look at 2 is the type of people that are engaging, right? So you're trying to get beyond the champions that are usually providing most of the information. And then the last thing would be is, depending on the type of your company, is can you apply it or tie it to either acquisition or retention or support related numbers? So again, I talked about earlier how we tie our community engagement to our acquisition and retention numbers and how people are using the product.
Cool, fantastic. So thank you for that answer. And quickly, just, maybe we have time for just one more question. Libby Ingrassi is asking, what do you see as the distinction between champions and advocates? Biggest challenge for us is alignment consistently with other teams, but agree that it is vital.
Yeah, there's a member of our team who has a great framework for looking at it, Christina. So the champions are really primarily focused on contributing, driving engagement on the community platform, right? So they're basically co-piloting with your community managers to drive engagement and get more people more engaged. And obviously what's in it for them is they build their brand, et cetera. Advocates are spreading the word, spreading the gospel on other sites, on the internet or on apps, et cetera. The two can work closely together. There's definitely can be a Venn diagram of your advocates, your champions, and even other groups as well. So think of it, 1, focused on the community, 2, focused on what's going on beyond your borders on these properties that you don't own.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And we're at the end of our time. People have been asking about, the slides being shared. This presentation is being recorded, so it's going to be available for you to be able to watch later through CMX channels. So I can share that, and certainly it was a delight having you here, and it was an awesome presentation. Really appreciate all the insights that you've shared with us. So everybody else, we are actually heading out to another great session. So thanks for being with us, and thanks for listening to Scott and all the other esteemed presenters. So looking forward to seeing you at the next session.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.